بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Welcome everyone to Legends Untold, another journey through a life of a very significant individual, inshallah, today. He's very much related to two characters or two legends that we have already covered. Okay, he is very much related to first one, Sayyida al-Hurra. If you remember Sayyida al-Hurra, he's related to so their paths crossed, as well as who's the second one that was at the time of Sayyida al-Hurra? Barbarossa, right? So the two of them, their big boss was Suleiman Kanuni. Right? So their big boss at that time, towards the half-life of Barbarossa, was Suleiman Kanuni. If the sisters at the back, if you want to come to the front, it's absolutely fine. You guys can sit with your family circles. We're okay with that. If you want to bring chairs, feel free to do that. It's a family halaqah, so it's an open setting. Feel free to come forward, sit with your family, inshallah. I like the Turkish hat that he's wearing. Like the Turkish hat. You know, there's only one person left in Egypt who knows how to make this hat. Yes, there's only one person who knows this tradition. His tradition has been passed down by 7 generations, and he still has the dye that was used to make Suleiman Kanuni's hat till this day. And you have to give a custom order to this person. There's a lineup of 2 years you have to wait for him, because he's a one-man shop with his son that works there, and they literally make each one of these with their hands. And there's a YouTube video on the whole process, and it's just so tedious. But once he makes it, he's like, it will keep its shape for as long as you live, it will live with you, right? And then there are different types of hats and stuff like that. It's just amazing. That just reminded me of a completely different thing I didn't prepare for. All right. So today we're talking about this person by the name of Suleiman al-Kanuni. Anybody has heard of that famous serial, TV series, the Suleiman the Magnificent? And in Arabic, it's called Harim Sultan. If any Arabs here, anybody Arabs? So it's called Harim Sultan, a very, very famous TV serial. They show him, Suleiman al-Kanuni, as a person indulged in just, things that were not appropriate, and he was all about money and women and just getting married, and a complete distortion of who he was. And sadly, the person who wrote that musalsal, that TV series, was an Egyptian person who was almost an atheist. So he considered himself Muslim, but he didn't really believe in anything related to Islam. And his main focus was he wanted to spread secularism within the lands of Egypt. So he was a very influential person, and they said, can you write something related to Suleiman al-Kanuni that we can take back and make a TV series and completely distort the image of this great individual? Now, what's really interesting about Suleiman al-Kanuni is that if you, any one of you, just give me 1 second. Okay, so the kids that go to elementary schools, how many of you are in elementary schools? Raise your hands. You're in secondary school? Yeah. What secondary school? Grade 9? Okay. Grade 6, okay. Elementary schools? Okay. Did your teachers ever use a website called ducksters.com? Okay. So one of the common go-to resource in Western worlds for teachers to teach history to young kids of that age is called duckster.com, right? You have history, biography, geography, science, games, and it's all in a format that is very appropriate to children to read. So I always like to find, so if you go there, it's called, the category is history, then biographies for kids, and then early Islamic world. And in early Islamic world, they have a biography of Suleiman the Magnificent. Now, it's really interesting. If you read that biography, it has nothing to do with him. As a matter of fact, the biography is written in a way that the child is going to walk away reading that, oh my God, he was such a loser. Now I'll read a portion, and I'm telling you this because this distortion of biographies in English is an agenda. It's not something randomly happening. So for example, it says the siege of Vienna. Okay, so that siege, it says, Suleiman al-Kanuni surged into Hungary. He struck fear in the hearts of many Europeans unfairly. One of the main powers of Europe was the Empire of Austria. They also were the leaders of the Holy Roman Empire. Their capital was Vienna. In 1529, Suleiman and his army arrived in Vienna. Suleiman's army laid siege to Vienna over 2 weeks. However, the march to Vienna had taken a toll on his army. Many of his soldiers were sick and had to abandon his siege equipment along the way due to bad weather. When the winter storm arrived, Suleiman had turned back, suffering a major defeat at the hands of the Europeans. Okay, so just keep that passage in mind. And then so when I talk about the siege of Vienna and see how different the two things are compared to the reality and how it was. Now in his achievements, there's only one paragraph. Now when I looked at academic documentation on his achievements, you actually find that they were like, if you just type in Suleiman al-Kanuni achievements, just type that. You're going to find on SlideShare tons of slides, like one of the first links or second links that I clicked on, it had around 19 or 20 slides of his achievements. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. Each one could be a 15 to 20 minute talk. But again, you know, his achievement says he was an excellent leader who helped transform Ottoman Empire into an economic powerhouse. Wow, how great, mashallah. That's so nice, right? Pyar muhabbat. The time that Suleiman ruled was known as the golden age in the culture. Never to talk about the fact that he was called Suleiman al-Kanuni. Okay? And the reason I bring this up is for parents, because many of you are parents over here and you need to be aware of this. This particular thing in history, and when you have a warfare that is taking place, but it is an intellectual warfare. They call this agenda setting function theory. You can go read up on this. Agenda setting function theory. So the summary of it is there is something called the reality or actuality of what happened. There is the agenda. And if they can somehow create a new perception of reality that is not aligned with the reality, but rather aligned with the agenda and pushes people closer to the agenda rather than the reality. And this is happening all the time with our history. All the time, the way it is documented. Okay? There's lots of articles you can read on it, and you're going to find this time and again that this takes place so much with Muslim history. So today we're going to begin Suleiman al-Kanuni and his life. The primary focus is going to be a quick synopsis of his life. I'm not going to give the historical background because I've covered the historical backgrounds at the times of Barbarossa, Khairuddin al-Barbarossa, and I've also covered historical backgrounds at the time of Sayyid al-Hurra, so very similar times. There is battles, and just summary of it, there is the Knights Hospitallers, or the Knights of St. John's. They're the Crusaders. They're the most vicious type of Crusaders. Today, the country of Malta is actually built on the ruins of the Knights Hospitallers. The Blackwater Company that was used in a lot of it's a third party security company that is used by many foreign countries today to, do activities in the Muslim lands. All of them, they trace back their roots to the Knights Hospitallers and Crusaders, right? And that's a completely separate section that you guys can look up. This is just for the adults to have a segue if you want to read about that. It's something there. So Suleiman al-Kanuni, he's also called Suleiman al-Awwal. He's also called Suleiman al-Kanuni. He's also called in English Suleiman the Magnificent. So many names have been given to him. It is estimated that during his time he ruled 25 million people. He was one of the longest serving kings of the Khalifas or the kings of the time of the Islamic history. He lasted for very long. More importantly, he was born in 1994, 6th of November. Anybody born on 6th of November here? No? Nobody born on 6th of November? Usually people are. No. So he was born 6th of November, 1494. He died 6th of September, 1566. Okay? And his name was Suleiman al-Kanuni, the longest reigning sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Okay? Now, during the early ages of Suleiman al-Kanuni, early life, he was born in a city of Trabzon. Today, the majority of the Arab world, they're buying their properties in Trabzon. And, you know, a lot of the Middle East money is all going to Trabzon. Very beautiful place to visit in Turkey by the coast of the Black Sea. Beautiful, beautiful place. So he was born in Trabzon on 6th of November, 1994. His mom's name was Hafsa Sultan. The only thing we know about her is she was a convert. We don't know where she came from, what was her origins. We know that her original, she was a convert and she was not actually a Muslim. Her origins are unknown till this day. Nobody knows where she actually was from. At age 7, Suleiman al-Kanuni started learning science, history, literature, theology, military tactics at that age. Now, at that age, and specifically, he was sent to Topkapi Palace in Constantinople at a very young age. And at that point, he spends until he becomes the age 25, he spends his entire time just perfecting art, math, sciences, and all the various fields. Upon the death of his father in 1520, he decides, Selim I passed, Suleiman entered Constantinople, and he becomes the 10th Ottoman Khalifa, or the king. He is the 10th grandson of a very famous TV show. What's a very Turkish TV show? Ertuğrul. He is the 10th grandson of Ertuğrul. So he goes back to the direct descendant of Ertuğrul. Okay? It is mentioned about him that Sultan is only 25. Actually, he was 26 according to Hijri. 25 years old. He was a tall, slender person, very tough built, thin and a bony face. He, at this age, had very nominal facial hair coming. So facial hair is kind of like coming, a werewolf type of a beard, right? It was still growing. It was not there. And Sultan appeared to be a person who was very known for his good humor. And rumors had it that he enjoyed reading a lot more than controlling the countries. And he was very, very knowledgeable in many, many other things that we're going to talk about soon. Now, Suleiman al-Kanuni had during his time, three main challenges. Challenge number one was that the European conquest needed to expand. Challenge number two, the Ottoman Empire needed to expand. So they were expanding, but they were really slow. And challenge number three was at the hands of the Shi'as, the Safawi dynasty. Okay? The Safawi dynasty. If it is mentioned that if Suleiman al-Kanuni had not put a stop to the Safawi dynasty, today you would not have the true religion or version of Islam in the Middle East. So his fight against the Shi'as, and by the way, the reminiscence of that Safawi dynasty eventually ends up becoming the modern day Khomeini and Iran and what you see today. So if you read history, you're going to find reminiscences of that same dynasty till today, which is there, and their primary purpose as a dynasty, we're not talking about Shia as individuals, we're talking about the political structure of that, is the distortion of Islam, more importantly, aligning with our enemies to destroy Muslims from any possible prospect. Now, if you look at it today, everything that is taking place within Arabia is not a coincidence. If you think about it, Yemen being controlled or trying to be controlled by the Shi'as, and if you look at it, they call it Hilal al-Shi'i, the Shia crescent. So if you look at it, Makkah is surrounded by countries that are predominantly Shias. And and that's all related to Safawi dynasty. That's not the topic of our discussion today, but it's something very important for us to understand. So now what happens is that's his three challenges. So on the first challenge, what was the first challenge? Let's see if you guys are taking notes. the European conquests, okay? The European conquests and the conquest of Europe. That was the first challenge. So he had major battles. Today's discussion is not on battles. Today's discussion is his advancements in Kanun, in law, his advancements in art. That's what we're going to focus on. There is an entire section that we can literally do like multiple series on his conquests. We're only going to touch on one of the main conquests that he had. And that was the Battle of Mohács or Mohács. The Battle of Mohács took place. At that particular battle, you had Kingdom of Hungary, Croatia, Holy Roman Empire, Bavaria, Papal States, all the states that were controlled by Rome at that time, Kingdom of Poland, all of them combined. And they decided that they're going to attack Suleiman Kanuni and his army with 40,000, and another narration around 60,000 troops. And on the other hand was 50,000 Muslim troops. Suleiman Kanuni, main leader, led by the second person who was the Pasha, Paragali Ibrahim. He was the second person, he was a childhood friend of Suleiman Kanuni, and they decide to do the battle. The battle actually lasted less than a soccer match. 90 minutes, less than that. It lasted for some 80 minutes. And the Muslims were victorious. The interesting thing what he did, this is something that nobody has ever done at that battle, was his primary focus was, how do we confuse the enemy? And once there is confusion, nobody follows military lines, nobody follows the commands of the commanders, and we're able to then benefit. So what he does is he puts his army in a staggered fashion, 1st Battalion, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Battalion, 4th Battalion. And then what happens is you have the enemy that is about to attack. He tells the 1st Battalion, charge, and he tells the rest of them, retreat. So they're like, what is going on? So they thought, Muslims are so scared of us. Look, these foolish 1st Battalion are attacking us. The rest of them are already retreating. They don't know that they're going to be losers because there's nobody to defend them. When the rest of the sidelines, they retreated, they brought cannons, and before even the battle started, and they had, they exchanged sword fights, the 1st Battalion also retreated, and they started bombarding them with cannons. And now you had an entire army that was opened up to them to attack to cannons. That caused such a chaos that within 90 minutes, less than 90 minutes, over 20,000 of their troops were killed, and only 1,500 Muslims. And when that chaos took place, they were like, all these countries of Europe, the only 2 major countries that did not participate was Europe at that time and Portugal, because they had decided to become Protestants and they did not want to join the Catholics. Everything else was, everything, like all of them were there. And so, UK too. United Kingdom. Did I say UK? No, and United Kingdom too, right? Because they were on the slot of saying, we're no longer Catholics, we're Protestants, so we're going to be different, we don't want to join you guys. Ironically, France joined the Muslims, which is really weird. The French people, they sent a battalion of, like if you look at the leaders, there is the French leader, Guéry and Devalt, they are also part of the army. And the only reason they did that is because the Crusaders of St. John's, they were really excessive in power and they were gaining power. And they were attacking French, specifically the port of Toulon in France. So France needed help from the Muslims. So they sent a letter to Suleiman al-Kanuni that, hey man, we need help. Our own people are attacking us. We need you to come and help us. Guess what? Suleiman al-Kanuni sends this official letter to the king at that time of France, and he says, I, Suleiman al-Kanuni, and the entire letter, it's written in Arabic, and he says, you have requested our help, and we are here to help anybody who is a mazloom. Although you are from our enemies, but we will still help you because you are oppressed. So they went and helped. And because of that, you know that today the city of Nice, in which recently that had the guy that drove a truck and stuff like that, they had some terrorist stuff happening, like I think a couple of years ago or 3-4 years ago. The city of Nice was liberated at the hands of Suleiman Kanuni's troops. And then out of reverence for Suleiman al-Kanuni, they gave him the port of Toulon, which now became an epicenter of battle for Muslims, and that was where a lot of the ships would embark on, and that became main primary military port for them. Okay. A side segue, it is something really interesting, is when France was the head of the G20, this is for the older people, you're going to enjoy this. The France was the head of G20, and they were not happy with certain things that Turkish people were doing, especially Erdogan. President Macron, and this is in 2016 or 17, he decided to show up unannounced to make sure that they place, listen, you're part of G20, but you've crossed some lines and we need to make sure you stay in check. So Erdogan, in response, actually took out the letter of Suleiman al-Kanuni and gave it to him. He said, this is you guys. You're forgetting what we did for you. You were in need of help. We came to your help. And he gave him that letter, and then it was he just backed down, and then everything just went on. He's like, don't forget your history. Like, we were the ones that came to your help. Don't come and tell me what I need to do. Right? It's really interesting if you know your history, where you stand, right? So this was a very, very interesting battle. Till this day in Hungary, I met a girl in Portugal. She was working in a hotel in Lisbon, and she was from Hungary. And she was selling some stuff in the lobby of a hotel or something like that. I don't know what she was selling. I can't remember. But she came up to me and we started talking. I was like, no, I'm not interested in buying this. I'm just a visitor. I'm here for corporate work. And then she was like, oh, I'm from Hungary. I'm like, oh, wow, you're from Hungary. Okay, and I was like, I've read a lot about Hungary. He's like, what have you read? I said, I've read about Suleiman al-Kanuni and the Battle of Mohács. And then she says, oh, by the way, in our language, we have a saying. So when they want to say, बहुत बुरा हराया किसी को, like you lost really badly, we use the word, he said it was worse than Mohács. You lost worse than Mohács. It's actually become a mathal, that how badly the people in Hungary lost. That became a parable that they use today to denote someone's really bad loss. Oh man, these guys, they lost even worse than Mohács. Right? And that's where the first time I was like, wow, like these things have an everlasting effect on even their psyche. That they don't know about Suleiman Kanuni, but they know that we lost one of the most important battles, and that was a really bad thing for us. Okay, no more about battles. As I told you, I can carry on doing about battles, but that's not the point. Let me just go here. No, sorry, wrong page. Yes. So why was he called Kanuni? Why do you think? What's the secret thing in Kanuni that you can hear? What did he do? He did legislation. Who said that? He said yes. So in Sharia, you have fuqaha and the ulama, and they put fiqh. They put the books of fiqh together, and a sheikh or an alim can use a certain set of principles to come to a conclusion and say, based on my understanding, this is the opinion. The same sources, the same evidentiary grounds can be used with a different set of lens. We can come to a different conclusion. And that is the source of where we have all of these varying opinions. Why, this school of thought says this and this school of thought. They're using the same sources. It's just how they interpret the text and what lens they use to come to that conclusion. So it was very difficult because now you have varying opinions of 4 schools of thought, and then you have the Athari school of thought or the Ahl Hadith school of thought, and what the judges are really confused, so I'm a Hanafi judge at that time, I will use the Hanafi school. I am a Shafi'i, I'll use the Shafi'i, and it was all over the place. So Suleiman al-Kanuni, he's like, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to have to come up with a set singular code of legislation for all the criminal code. And those of you that attended the khutbah, we talked about it today, that our fiqh has been divided into 5 primary categories: ibadat, muamalat, munakahat, jinayat. And then you have something which is called the category of jihad or politics in general. Warfare is just one section of it, but overall, how do you govern a state? How do you govern a country? So these 5 categories. So he's like, you know what? We're going to have to create singular rules. Like if this happens, this is a rule. This happens, this is a rule. We don't care about like all this scholarly. Like for the person making the judgment, it has to be singular. Okay. Now there were opinions that as a hakim, as a ruler at that time, he chose an opinion that might have been an opinion that was probably not the strongest, but it was an opinion. Right? So you get it? So there's an opinion about something. There are 2 opinions. 7 scholars are of this opinion, but there are 3 of this opinion. As a ruler, he said, I'm not going to choose the 7. I'm going to use this one. Because I see the maslahah of my people as a ruler, and this should be appointed in that legal code. So he actually took the sharia or the sacred law, and then what he did was he built something which is called the Kanun or the legislation, and he codified it with a very famous scholar of that time, Abu Saud. Abu Saud has written one of the very prominent tafsirs. As a matter of fact, actually I was like right before this, I was actually reading. I think I have, So I was reading a tafsir that he had written, Abu Saud, and it's beautiful. Like even till this day, if you look at it, like you can get a PDF copy of the tafsir that he has written in Arabic. He was actually a Turkish person, but when I was reading this tafsir, I was like, man, like he was so connected to the people of that time. How to apply Quran to the people of that time. So amazing to read his tafsir and how he was, and his tafsir is called Irshadul Uqul, the guidance of our intellects towards the book of Allah. How do you curtail your intellect? How do you guide your intellect to inspire it through the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So in every single tafsir that he does, he tries to connect to. So Abu Saud, who was the Grand Mufti at that time, they came up with 200 laws. 200 primary laws. Or you can say 200 chapters, and then each law has a sub-law. So law, sub-law, sub-law, sub-law. And he was able to actually codify that. Sultan also played a very, very major role. We talked about this in Barbarossa, but it is worth mentioning again. During 1553 and 1554, he ordered 7 conquests where Barbarossa sailed all the way to the ports of Spanish ports, and as per the farman of the Suleiman al-Kanuni, he freed multiple Jews as well as Muslims from the Spanish Inquisitions, and he brought them back to Maghrib al-Arabi at that time, the great Morocco, and alhamdulillah, he was able to save so many people at that time. Now, so this is primarily why he was known Suleiman al-Kanuni, because he was the one who established the Kanun. Later on, most of the European constitutions, as a matter of fact, even like I was listening to a lecture, it said, let me quickly look it up, Suleiman al-Kanuni. In the Congress, in the US Congress actually, they have an image of him. Yeah. They have an image of him that is etched on the walls of Congress of US till today. The Constitution of US and many of the constitutions that we find in these European countries that have such amazing laws related to humanity and respecting human rights, a lot of them were primarily inspired by the 200 canonical laws that Suleiman Kanuni had written during his lifetime with the help of the famous scholar Abu Saud at that time and multiple other scholars of that time. This is called Kanun al-Usmani till this day, and almost up till 1875. No, even 1920, the last person, Basha, what was his name? What was the last Basha's name? I just had it and I just slipped my mind. Allahu Akbar. The last ruler of Sultan Abdul Hamid. Sultan Abdul Hamid Basha, who was the last one, he basically ruled and governed Turkey and the entire Muslim world using this Kanun system. Now, the other thing that was very famous around the time of Suleiman al-Kanuni was under his reign, art became a trade. He actually established a community of craftsmen. It was called Ahlul Hirfa or Ahlul Hiraf, the community of craftsmen, and he created a department of cultural development at that time. No other country had a department of cultural development at that time. He established that. There were over 40, in 1526, there's a list that you find in 1526. There were around 40 societies, which means across the Muslim world, there were people that belonged to a society, and that society had members, and they had members of over 600 members that were primarily focused on three main arts: Arabic arts, Turkish arts, and because of a lot of the Europeans becoming Muslims or European lands being conquered by Muslims, European art. And then what you find is the Masjid al-Sulaiman, Masjid al-Sulaimani, which is found in Turkey today. That masjid was inspired by a special art which is now known as the Suleiman al-Kanuni art, which is the blend of the Arabic art, the Turkish art, and the European culture and their artistic designs blended together. His father before him, Selim I, his father, he was inspired by the Arabic and the Persian art. So there's a massive difference in design when you go to Turkey of things that his father built compared to what he built. So his things, if you look at these mosques, they have a European touch with those minarat and stuff like that. They have a blend of that Arabic domes, but then they have their own Turkish attachment to it and the Turkish calligraphy. Speaking of calligraphy, he was a master calligrapher and a master goldsmith. He would build stuff with his hands. It is mentioned that he wrote the Quran with his own hands 8 times. One of the copies of that is still available in Topkapi Palace. The one that he wrote with his own hands. So he was not just a person who was enriched in a warfare and he knew how to run a country and run a battle, but on the lands of arts and culture, he was at the forefront at that time during his time. Suleiman Kanuni was also an established poet in Persian and in Turkish. He had diwan, he had Turkish poetry. His Turkish poetry is called al-Muhabba. And also when his son passed away, he wrote a chronogram for his son, and that was called, this is probably Sir Idris uncle can read this better than me, but it's in Farsi. It's called Shehzada, I don't know, whatever, Guzida Zi Sultan Muhammadam. Agar Baba sun rahe hain to aap correct kar le mujhe. This is Turkish. This is Farsi, and that's not my realm. Really interesting was that where did it go? Okay. Then also during his time, Suleiman al-Kanuni became primarily renowned for sponsoring a series of monumental architectural developments throughout the Muslim world. And one of the primary ones, anybody remembers the architect Sinan? You guys have never come, wow man, we're really, the whole architect world is built on this guy. You know what, I think I'll do Sinan. You guys have never heard of Sinan? You're joking, right?
Heard of what?
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, Sinan is like there would be no architecture if Sinan didn't exist. Like he is considered by the architectural world the father of architects. He was like he built, like I'll give you an example of this. Like again, you guys, yeah, this is. So the restoration of the Dome of the Rock and the design that you see of the Dome of Rock was done by Sinan. Okay, he actually built a masjid so Suleiman Kanuni was like very upset. He was like, main speech deta hu, I give these speeches, nobody can hear me. So he's like, all right, I will build you a masjid that you're not going to require any microphones, and the person sitting till the end of the masjid will be able to hear you. So his knowledge of geometry, math, he created a masjid, the second masjid for Suleiman al-Kanuni, which was used to propel the messages of Suleiman al-Kanuni. So if you ever wanted to give an address to people, you could literally till this day go at the spot of the mihrab and talk, and there could be a person sitting at the end and they'll be able to hear you without any microphones, with the projection of sound. And usage of harsh surfaces, soft surfaces, crevices, how sound will bounce. And just imagine, this was all calculations he did without any calculators. Okay? Yeah, Sinan is wow, I thought you guys would, at least some like. So there are more than 300 monuments across Europe, Asia, that are attributed to Sinan. Just look up monuments of Sinan. There are roughly around 320 monuments of Sinan. Okay? His full name is Maimar Sinan. Okay? Mi'mar. It's actually Mi'mar, the builder. Mi'mar. In English, it's like Maimar. Sorry, that was a segue. I was not supposed to go there. Now we know that you must know. He also renovated the Kaaba, if I remember correctly. He also renovated what you find today, some of the writings at Masjid al-Nabwi. All of those were done by Sinan at that time. Okay, Suleiman al-Kanuni had a lot of kids, lots of children. And the most unfortunate part is his primary relation with Harim Sultan, she was Harim Sultan. She was a diplomat that was from Poland, and obviously he fell in love with her. And the entire life in the modern day culture and the modern day media, television, if you type in even Suleiman Magnificent, the only thing you hear about is the love story. And this is again agenda setting. They don't want you to focus on the other things. They only want you to focus on, oh, look at him. He was this. He fell in love with a Polish girl. He was just a great lover. And that's what they want you to know. Okay? It was a lot more than that. So who remembers Vienna? You guys remember Vienna? Okay. So let's see what happened to Vienna. Where did it go? My slides. Here we go. Okay, so there's one other portion I think this is important for us to expand on, and then I'll go to Vienna. So the other portion related to Suleiman al-Kanuni is that when he took over power from his father, at that time, the area that he ruled, Suleiman al-Kanuni, was roughly 4,200 square thousand miles. Okay? I don't know how big that is, but it's big. Okay? It's huge. It's huge. Like 4,000 miles, 5,000 kilometers. How far would it from here to where? At least Edmonton, right? At least Edmonton, 3,000 kilometers, right? So, but you're talking about square miles. Yeah, so square miles, right? And then this was all in the European area. He controlled a lot of that. But Arabia, Africa, the North Africa, the Indian Ocean, the campaigns against, Hamid Suleiman Pasha, Sayyid Ali Rais, all of those, the Iran, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, all of that area he did not control at this time. But towards the end of his reign, he had control over the entire half of Africa, the entire Arabian Peninsula, every single port that existed on the entire half of Africa, the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean. There was not a port that was controlled by him. And his expansion was so vast that it is considered that in terms of area-wise, he was the ruler that controlled the largest amount of Nesema or capital per head at that time. No ruler at that time was called a ruler. He had more than 25 million people that were under his rulership at that time. At that time, we're talking about it, right? And the next closest person to him in terms of monarchy was at that time the king of, or the queen of the queen of UK at that time, and she had a control of close to 1 million people. So compare that to where he was. Like there was no comparison, under his administration. It was crazy. His reign was from 1522 to 1566, which is considered almost 47 years and some days or something like that, which is the longest rule by any Khalifa and the longest definitely within the Ottoman Empire. Now we come to Vienna. So Vienna, something really interesting happens. The military campaign, that is true. What they mentioned about the Duckster, he attacks Vienna for the first time, he fails. And his failure was not due to the fact that he was tired and stuff. His failure was he did not anticipate snow. So it actually snowed and his people were not ready for snow. So he's like, we need to backtrack because we didn't come prepared for snow and we're going to die out of cold. Then the second conquest takes place. And the second conquest is where you actually, you remember his legacy. So he takes over Vienna and they find that the walls of Vienna, his grandfather had tried, they failed. The one before, his father tried, they failed. His first attempt failed. His 4 attempts to Vienna failed. They had just fortified, such huge fortified walls, it was impossible to get in. So then finally he decided something that nobody has ever thought of. Until this day, his technique is used by France and US as a war technique till today. That they don't want these Muslim kids to know. Right? His technique was, hey man, we can't break the walls, let's dig tunnels underneath and let's go underneath the city and go up. So he had an entire army of 10,000 people that were digging night and day underneath, at least 2 meters deep. So going down 2 meters and then digging the tunnel big enough for a person to walk. Taking all of that out, all the way across the walls, because they did not anticipate the walls to be deeper than 22 meters. But when they hit the walls, they actually found that the walls were way deeper than 2 meters. So they had to dig, like the tunnel had to go like this, up underneath the wall. So they had to dig through the wall. And eventually, they go all the way in to the center of the city, undetected. So there's a battle going on from the front, and they are attacking from the bottom. And then they come out, and they just put in explosives, and they blow up the city from the ground. And that causes such a huge havoc, and that people leave their positions at the gates, and that allows them to open the gates and enter. That was not it. Now, Suleiman Kanuni, what happens to him during the end of his lifetime was something really interesting. He becomes extremely sick, and his sickness was something that the doctors at that time and the Grand Vizier at that time, which was his friend, he said to him, stay and do not leave. He said, how can I do that, man? We are about to be victorious in Hungary. We're about to take over Hungary. So we're going to be, the next battle was the Hungary. So he's like, if I step down now, what are the people going to say? Because of sickness? And he says, لأن أموت غازيا أفضل عندي أن أموت على سرير الفراش على فراشي. That I die as a ghazi, I die as a victor in the battlefield is much better for me than me dying out of sickness on my deathbed. So then you find that Suleiman al-Kanuni, at that time he was 72 years of age. Many of us, when we hit the age 55, we're like, Bude ho gaye. 40, oh man, taange dard karne lag gayi. I can't go play squash anymore. Right? He was 72 years of age at that time. Subhanallah. And he was extremely sick. But despite that fact, he said, you know what, I'm going to get up. And he said, bring me a special horse, because he was extremely sick. And they got a special horse and a special place for him to get on. And he marched, subhanallah, he marched all the way from Turkey, Istanbul, to Hungary. Like, think about it. From there, you're coming down, like, while you are sick with fever and sickness that the doctors have said, you're dying from it. You're not coming out of it. And he's like, no, I cannot leave my people alone. So that battle was something really, it took place at the kingdom of Hungary. And Suleiman al-Kanuni, what they find is that, they go into that battle, and for 5 months, they put a siege to that city in Hungary. The siege of Saist Vera, that's the siege which is called it was from 5th of August. 5th of August it started, and it lasted for 5 months. Okay. Then the battle began, and that battle lasted for almost 1 month, until one night Suleiman al-Kanuni was in his tent, and he said, and he made a dua to Allah, and he said, "Oh Allah, I ask you that do not take my life until I see the victory of this battle. Oh Allah, open up the doors of your victory for these people, for wallahi, if they don't become victorious, I am not going to be able to stand in front of you and answer you." And that same night, when the cannons were shooting, the cannons accidentally shot at the gunpowder storage. And when that landed, the gunpowder storage exploded. That explosion caused a massive havoc within the people, and the army, the Hungary army, was at loss at that time. And the total at that time, the number of people that were fighting, this is going to blow your minds. The strength the strength of that palace that fought for and sometimes you actually find it's, these things are opposite, right? So you find that there were only 3,000 people that were defending Hungary at that time, but they put up a fight of 5 months against an army of 100,000 Muslims. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Some days Muslims become victorious with small number of people, and some days Muslims, they lose. So imagine in this one, they were only 3,000. The battle almost wiped out the entire army, almost 2,300. But at the Muslims, we had a loss of 30,000 people, right? At the hands of only 2,000 people. And this is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that sometimes Allah is going to show you victory. Sometimes Allah is going to test you. Kitna sabr kar sakte ho? You are fighting for what? For victory, or are you fighting for me? And that was the sign in this one. That 5 months onslaught and a month battle, and finally they all become victorious. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them victory. And Suleiman al-Kanuni, then he says, Al-an tabatil maut. Now death is going to be very sweet. And then Suleiman al-Kanuni passes away. When he passes away, something really interesting happens. Before passing away, there is a note that is left behind after his passing away. And the note says, "Do not bury me except with the box, or like a treasure box that I have left in my room X. Bring that box and bury that box with me." So Abu Saud at that time and the fuqaha, they said, look, if it's treasure, it is haram for us in Sharia to bury the treasure of somebody with their grave. That treasure is meant for people who are alive, and we have to distribute it according to the fiqh of Sharia. And we are not going to fulfill the command of Suleiman al-Kanuni and his will, because it's against Sharia. So they open that treasure box, and what they find is in Suleiman al-Kanuni's treasure box is no treasure. Rather, it's filled with scrolls and papers. So Abu Saud, he picks up that one of the papers, and it's a fatwa. And the fatwa states, O Grand Mufti, I am about to remove trees from my garden. The trees house ants in the roots. Is it halal for me to take away the house of these ants and to uproot these trees or not? So to that, when they read this, the Abu Saud, he said, Subhanallah, O Suleiman al-Kanuni, you protected yourself in the eyes of Allah, that Allah, I took every decision according to a mufti. Main khud nahi kuch kiya. Everything was verified by, I am not an alim, but I verified everything with a grand mufti, and here are all the fatwas based on which I made all my decisions. So he says, Subhanallah, Ya Suleiman al-Kanuni, laqad anqadhta nafsak. You saved yourself and screwed us. Put us in trouble. Oh Allah, man, I didn't, these are the guys. The fatwa was theirs. I just followed the fatwa. Right? But he tells you their zeal in terms of following sunnah, in terms of that, and knowing where they are. He is the Suleiman Kanuni. He is a sha'ir. I mean, हम में से किसी को शेर आते हो, कुरान लिखना आता हो, तो वो तो शेख बन जाता है साथ ही. Right? MashaAllah, I can write the entire Quran and I know some shairs. I'm a sheikh. Right? It's a matter of great responsibility to speak on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Suleiman al-Kanuni passed away. It is mentioned that, as per some, again, I don't know the authentication of this, but as per some of the accounts, that certain, because he was in the battle and he was hurt in that battle, so I think his hands and certain parts of his body were buried where he was, and then his body was actually transported to Turkey, and it was brought in Turkey and buried. What is the verification of that, whether it is actually his body or not, Allahu alam, we don't know those details. But again, till this day, people go today to visit him.